Yo, what's up, everybody? I hope you are doing well. I know we got a little pop-up stream that we are doing today that I kind of just dropped on your heads. I appreciate everybody hanging out today or tonight or wherever time it is or whatever time it is, wherever you're at. I thank you so much for joining us and everybody that's viewing this after the fact. Today, I am joined by Irene Strychalski, who is
Hi.
the creator of the Fiendish series, which I've talked about extensively. I like to think
Thank you.
on the channel several times. Obviously, she's done some great art pieces for us. This lovely poster behind me, as well as Yaira
Yeah.
3, as well. She just did a cover that featured Yaira and Stefania fighting, which was incredible. How you doing, Irene?
I am doing great. Thank you so much for having me on. I know you're incredibly busy, so I very much appreciate it. It's good to talk again. It's good to be here.
Yes, we've discussed comics and things of the matter before in the past, especially on my show on For Canon's Sake. Had a lot of fun. Obviously, I credit you a lot for some of the material that you've created, not just with your work. Fiendish is awesome, and we're going to talk heavily about that. But you've offered like some insight, creative insight on the process, which I really appreciate. I think a lot of other creators that are out there, can pick up on something. I'm always saying, hey, you should follow her because she'll do some little tips, things that you may get at least something from, because she's a really creative gal and has some awesome talent there. So big shout outs to you. But before we get into all of that stuff and nerding about the creative process, Fiendish Chapter 3. We're on 3. I can't remember if it was 1 or 2 or maybe even 2.5 that we were talking about last time you were here.
It was a while ago.
Yeah,
I think it was 2.
It might have been. It might have been. It's been a while. But yeah, now you're kind of going into the third volume here. I want you to just give everybody kind of a quick pitch, maybe those that are in the audience that are unfamiliar with the Fiendish series, what it's about, genre and whatnot. And yeah, just give us the whole spiel.
Okay, well, Fiendish is my comic, and it is a fantasy mystery series. And if you can see the little website under my name, you can check it out right there. But to give the spiel about what the story is about, Fiendish is a story, a fantasy epic that follows Kazmir. And Kazmir is a young boy whose hometown and his whole family was destroyed, murdered by these mysterious demons that came out of nowhere when he was just 11 years old. And not only were his parents killed by these monsters, but his little twin sisters, and they weren't just eaten by these monsters, they were devoured and turned into these mummies. It was a very strange type of killing, and no one knows what these creatures actually are, even though it's a fantasy world with magical beasts. And these creatures kind of destroyed his hometown and then just came out of nowhere and disappeared. And Kazmir, as far as anyone knows, is the sole survivor. His older brother, whom he was really close to, died protecting him. And the last words that his brother told him were, "Run away and never come back." So that's what he did. He fled far away and tried to forget about his past. And he kind of lives as this reclusive hunter that had a strange backstory about his childhood, and everybody thinks he's kind of crazy and weird, and he just lives in the woods. But he found peace far away, and he grew up and became an adult. But at the beginning of Fiendish 1, those demons that destroyed his hometown and killed his family, they resurface again, and Kazmir is forced to face his nightmares. So when these monsters return and kill in the woods again, he decides that he must face his fears and return to his past and get to the bottom of what these creatures really are. And as the story progresses, that leads to a greater world-changing mystery that's slowly revealed as things proceed. So that is the story of Fiendish, and
I love that.
it's yeah. And if you want to find out more, you can look at the website. I have free previews, and of course there are the campaigns. You can get all the books on here or on the new Kickstarter.
And as she just mentioned, new Kickstarter is not active right now. I know that the mods have it in the chat as well as in the description and maybe even pinned on the comment section. I'm not exactly sure, but go grab this. Obviously, you can get the in demand Indiegogo, by the
Mhm.
way,
Yeah.
but right now the live campaign is Kickstarter, so you can go over there and go support this. Now, the thing that I love so much about Fiendish and what I often credit you for is that you've really you've placed a lot in the actual world, the world building
Mhm.
aspect of it. Also
Yeah.
the maps. I've talked about our stuff that you've done for us. I'd never mentioned that I don't know if a lot of you guys know this, but the Great War Separation, if you've read that book, that map that you see at the beginning of the book was done by Irene. She did it.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah,
It was
so just in case you
fun.
didn't know that, I wanted to make sure she got credit for that. That said, between like your maps, the world, the languages that you have built, which is I admire that so much because definitely from a if I'm looking at it from the fans perspective, not just other creators and not just our colleagues and people that we may that do the same thing as we do, that the writers or artists or creators, customers, most importantly, the readers, the people that we do this for, that's the stuff that they nerd out about, right?
Mhm.
And your approach to it and how much care and thought that you've put into just world building, I believe is obviously it's one of your strengths, but it's awesome. It's something that you don't see. I think we focus a lot more on like, okay, we just want this awesome image, awesome artwork, which is yeah, it's all necessary for sure, but really focusing on the world building and making it an immersive place for some people to get lost in is one of the things that you guys or you have done extremely well with Fiendish.
Thank
So I wanted
you.
to give you opportunity to kind of talk about some of that stuff from just the general world building aspect with yours, particularly with your languages. I know you just were talking about that, but building your own language, like what was that like? And that's a tall order, and a lot of people wouldn't embrace that and accept that kind of as a task.
Right. So, yeah, I'm glad that that seems to be paying off all the world building that I put into, and thank you for for your kind words about that
Ah,
aspect of Fiendish. And the way I see it is, of course, the characters and their journey, they lead the story.
mhm.
They are the reason that the readers will care about what they're reading. So the characters always come first. But especially because I'm creating a fantasy story that's in an entire alternate universe.
Right.
I wanted to create a world that didn't feel like just another standard fantasy. I didn't want to just build off of Tolkien, as amazing as he is, and obviously, everyone who creates
Of
fantasy
course.
admires Tolkien. But I wanted to create something that felt original, familiar enough where the readers are comfortable, but surprising enough where you never know what exactly to expect. And building the map and especially the language was part of that, because
Right.
I think if you're reading a fantasy series and the characters are, especially a comic where there is actual writing on the page, I didn't want it to just be gibberish. I want
Right.
the world to feel realistic, like it's functioning and living. And it's very important, and I'm sure you've realized this as a writer as well, that your goal with your world building is what the reader sees on the page needs to feel like just a small part of a larger universe.
Absolutely.
They need to feel like there's something happening off screen, and
Yes.
that creates immersion and believability. So my goal with creating the language and all this other stuff, and I thought about the political systems and the functioning societies and all that, but I don't always show it on the page. But just the fact that as a writer, how things work, it subtly will show through, and it's an intuitive understanding that the reader will pick up on. Oh, this person knows what they're doing. Okay, I trust that this story will lead somewhere because the bones of the story, the foundation and the world is very strong. But right, going back to the language I created is called Narsa. I have the whole dictionary on the website. And
Oh.
whenever you see writing in the comic book, it is in Narsa. And I have this whole system where the characters, when they speak in English, they are actually speaking in a local dialect. They're speaking in like a common tongue. But
Mhm.
there you go, there's Nanarsa. And Nanarsa is a clerical language. So even though people speak in local dialect, kind of think about how the different languages in Europe work, or the different sub language of the Sinitic language, which is, Chinese languages work, versus Church Latin or Mandarin Chinese. You have a clerical language that is a systemized language that is used by the upper class and the clerics, and in my world, shamans and the kings and queens and people in royalty. They speak this natively, and all the record keeping is kept in this language. So, but people in the common people will speak dialects and their daily language. So in the comic, you'll see some characters switch between the languages depending on their station. For example, my shamans, which are a very prominent class of people, they're the magic users in my world. They all speak Narsa, and they're trained in that because they are the highly educated ones, and so on and so forth. And fun fact, the sound effects are also in Narsa, and I have a glossary at the back of every book. So you can not only look up what the Narsa text says when people do speak it on the pages, but you can figure out what the sound effects are just flipping through the back. And it's a bit of work, but I thought it was fun, and people who read Fiendish seem to really enjoy it because it's an extra level of immersion and believability.
No, I'm with you right there. I think that's one thing that I think it's very easy if you're a creator, writer, to kind of lose sight of that. I've seen this in music, especially where we get this tendency to we're creating for ourselves, and we're not really understanding that, well, they don't see it like us. They don't, or rather they don't hear it like us in the form of music. And the stuff that we may nerd out about is not necessarily the stuff that the reader or the viewer or the listener is going to nerd out about. Immersion is one of the things that I think is a very difficult thing for a lot of independent guys to capture, right? I mean, it feels like you're always playing catch up with the big dogs, especially if you're in comics, and you maybe get a tendency to try to skip that aspect of it, whether it be the world building, because you're trying to get from point A to, let's say, Z as fast as you possibly can. So you're trying to do the coolest thing that you can do just for the sake of being cool, not really understanding that this type of stuff right here is the stuff that the audience, the readers, are going to nerd out about. That you brought up a wonderful point in bringing up that level. It's fun to create, but it was with intent, right? It was with trying to make this a more immersive world. And everybody, I think every creator, writer has their kind of way of doing that. And you adding this element to it, I think, is not only it's a game changer, but it's something that a lot of people can't do. A lot of people wouldn't take the time to sit here and actually try to build out their own language, but also giving the audience the tools, not necessarily just holding their hand, but you're giving them the tools to, okay, if you even want to take it up a notch and really get immersed in this world, and even going as far as to how this would sound, and them saying this, you are able to do that. And I love that, because this is something that, like I said, it's a tall order. It's something like I don't think that I could do. Maybe if I sat down and just
you could do it. Just take time.
I don't know. This is something, though. This is more kudos to you, more credit to you. Like, I don't know if this is something that I can like even pull off, but that's cool. It's a thing that I believe that obviously is that's almost, when I say unique to you, I'm not saying that there aren't other people that you mentioned, Tolkien, and others that have done this. I'm saying that it's something that you were like, look, this is something that I can do. I'm going to do it. I'm going to put it out there, and it's not something that you're going to be able to find everywhere. Really sets your universe aside. And with us, I was over here at the Riververse. We're huge on universe, right? That's the whole point, right, of what we do. So I can really appreciate someone that pays as much attention to that aspect of the comic, it just as much of importance of what they're gonna physically like see, right, as far as on the actual pages. So this is awesome. I love to see this. This is big credit to you, and I would love to kind of get off and kind of talk about that stuff just creatively. So I mean, where do you start with something like that? Like, you're like, I'm making this universe. Was this something that you were like conceptualizing early on with Fiendish, or was it something that kind of came after the fact, after you laid that foundation? Was it something that you set to do, and how early on in the process was it that you were considering building your own language?
So it's funny because I was just going through my old sketchbooks, and I have a video recently going through. I've been keeping sketchbooks since I was like 13, but I
There you
looked
go.
at the that's also part of it, practice. But
Hmm.
um like I was seeing looking at my older sketchbooks from like 2018, which is when I really started working on Fiendish before putting anything out, and the language was very early, and I had even forgot about that. But the so the first draft of the alphabet came early, but then building the words, I kind of just started out with like me, you, he, her, and kind of like the basics. But the language building is an ongoing process
Okay.
because every time the characters speak in Narsa, I will realize there are words that I'm missing and I need to build new words
There
or
you
a
go.
whole
Okay.
set of words. Because, for example, in chapter 3, in the first few pages, which by the way, you could read the first 15 pages already online. I have that on Global Comics,
Old comic
and you
show.
can
Yep.
see, yeah, yeah, and shout out to them. You can see the Nanarsa language in action in just the second page as Kazmir and Ragna are having a conversation in Nanarsa, and they were talking about some of the shamanic ranks and some tests that's in the world building that I'm slowly going to reveal. And I realized I need to build words for all of that. So I built a whole system of words. I just spent a whole day not only doing the translation, but coming up with new terms that was in this shamanic system that I had come up with in English, but hadn't come up with in an art. So it's an organic, ongoing process, and it's kind of this living thing that grows with the comic.
Mm,
And what I think is something that I would tell anyone who's starting out building their own universe is it doesn't happen right away.
right.
I have written at least 10 drafts of Fiendish, and that's not to mention the edits that are ongoing. I
Hmm.
have notes files on my phone where every time I have an idea, I write down a note, and then I'll sit down for a whole day once in a while, and what I call it is combing. So I go through the script and I just comb through and figure out what in my notes are good, what I've learned about storytelling, because I'm always trying to learn from other people as well and come up with
Right.
new
Right.
ideas. And that's why I'm on YouTube talking with other people about making comics, because you're never at the pinnacle. There's always somebody
Agreed.
that knows information you don't know yet. So
Absolutely.
it's an ongoing process, and I'll comb through the script and figure out what I can improve on and what ideas would be straying too far from the original vision. And the first draft of Fiendish was completely different. And I've actually revamped the entire story a couple of times. And that willingness to throw away work where it really doesn't work is also important. So, especially in the early stages, you can't baby your work. The language came early, but then I realized that the character journeys and the way I had structured the different species and the conflicts just wasn't working. So I
Yeah.
threw it out. I kept the basic story of Kazmir's journey, and I rewrote the entire thing, and it's all the better for it. So
Yeah.
that's something that I always tell people. You have to be able to edit and view what you've created in a realistic light and
Yeah.
change if you have to.
Yeah, you have to have that wiggle room and that ability, to pivot. I've always told people, even with music, especially with music. In fact, that's one of my main examples. And the old saying is, or rather, the rule is that you don't fall in if you making an album, you don't fall in love with a song. And the
Yeah.
reason that is because depending on your setup, even if you're releasing this independently, it might not even make the album for that matter. You never know because over an extended period of time, it's just very similar. There's a lot of crossover with music and comics because it's not something that happens
Yeah.
like overnight, right? You're not just going to build out
Mhm.
an album in one day or something of that nature. It's usually a process, whether it goes through the writing process and then you actually record it and then once it gets mixed and in between those processes and as you're doing those processes, you have to have the flexibility to be able to adjust, right? There's been songs that Backwards have done. We've changed entire hooks. In fact, that's what me and my bandmates were talking about the other day as we return. Definitely since we dropped those two songs this year, a lot of people are waiting for like our more official return. And I'm like, we're sitting on all these songs, but we do have to because so much time has passed. We do maybe need to go in, touch up on some things, and I can tell you right now, there's going to be some of those hooks that we originally laid that aren't going to be the exact same. So I think even one of the White Pilled, I think was one of the which was one of our more recent songs that we released. That hook was not the same exact thing, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, Chat can correct me on this. I think of the video letting y'all listen to how it was originally done. It might have been the verse or the hook, but yeah, you have to have that flexibility, and not only
Mhm.
being open to the edit, but have that flexibility to you can have these ideas initially, but you're kind of leaving that wiggle room to pivot if you need to along the way. Which kind of
Yeah.
brings me, I know we talked about this a little bit last time, but it comes bring me to my I love to get kind of some insight on kind of your process as far as the character creation, if you will.
Mhm.
I've talked about like my universe Bible and how that's kind of where the Ripperverse was first kind of conceptualized, where I took a character like Isom and I built them out. Even things that I wasn't going to tell in the first story. I had those basic story beats that were in there. Then I went with the concept artist. I drew it as was infamously noted as the Eric sketch, the worst drawing that you ever see of
No.
me coming out with his coming up with his suit and whatnot. That happened very early on in the process, and in fact, it happened much earlier than I ever even come up with a script. What is your process? I know it may differ from character to character, and maybe there's as you're writing that script, maybe there's a character that you didn't account for. But are you I'm creating a character first and then telling the story, or is it like you got a story you want to tell and then you're creating the characters in I guess after the fact?
So I try to let it's a push and pull. It's kind of
Okay.
a both,
Hmm.
but with after the main set of characters. So I have one protagonist that's Kazmir, but then
Hmm.
there's a core set of kind of deuteragonists, or also they're almost main characters because I have four characters that follow him. They're kind of like the adventuring team. So there's Ragna, Yomi, and Iskul, and plus Kazmir, that's four of them. And after I've set out these characters who all have their own opposing viewpoints, and they view the central themes from opposing views, and they have different approaches. And I also, another important aspect of storytelling is theme. You have to know what your story is about, and a good way to structure your core characters is everyone has a different point of view on the central themes.
Okay.
And the protagonist team have one general view, but they can differ a little bit. They're on the positive side, right? And then the antagonist is a complete opposite view, and as well as the antagonist team. So you can have opposing views, but kind of different takes on those opposing views. That's a very general guideline. So that's how I start with. That's the structure that I start with when I think about how to build my characters, what their personalities are, and then beyond that, early on, I made the mistake of which I think is fairly common. I would think of characters that I thought were cool, that are often inspired by anime that I saw or other
Right.
comics that
Right.
I've read. It's like, this person with this cool powers, that would be
Yeah.
really cool. I want somebody like that in my comic as well. And I realized it bogged down the story so much,
Uh-huh.
especially with something as expansive as Fiendish. If I wanted to explore all these character stories just because they were cool, I would get distracted from the main plot. And I was
Absolutely.
never going to get done with my project. Like the story of Fiendish was never reached the end because it was too distracting. I was doing things just to be cool. So
Um,
what I realized I should do is I cut a bunch of those characters, and I would only introduce characters when the story called for it. And what I
okay.
realized was I still had this backlog on the back end, cool character abilities, and I had kind of this encyclopedia that was ready to go about character ideas and character designs. And when the story called for it, I would think, oh, I need a supporting character because the characters are my main team is in a new town and they need someone to lead them on this quest or guide them, but maybe this character subverts them and tricks them along the way. So what character do I have in my backlog who would fit that? And I would have all these abilities and personalities ready to go. And the story was guiding these new introductions by necessity. So I wasn't overdoing the world building and I wasn't
Mm,
distracting myself. And that's more
okay.
enjoyable for the reader as well, because
Yeah.
I believe firmly in not wasting the reader's time. If
Yeah.
they've given me their money and their time, then I need to make every page worth it.
Yeah. I got you. No, that is awesome. Um, perspective there. And I love how you mentioned it's awesome seeing people as I've been able to, just much like you, speaking with people that are in the comic book space and they have their own perspective. It's kind of cool seeing folks kind of, though different journeys, kind of land on in a similar place, right? With how they conduct a story, or more so how they, and at least in this case, as far as the relevancy, are building out a universe. And you really touched on something that I found most intriguing, and it's like a bad habit that a lot of creators make or have, and it's easy to get lost in that. Is trying to be cool for the sake of it, right? It can be
Mhm.
distracting, not only for, I believe, even for the reader. It can be where you're just trying to do cool stuff just for the sake of doing it, but it comes off as shallow, right? Especially if they
Yep.
don't know those characters, right? So it's no substance there. It might even look cool. It
Yes.
may be this awesome concept, like I have this character with these awesome powers, right? And maybe that came from influence or whatever character that you liked. To your point, you brought up anime, whether it be from a previous
Mhm.
comic book from another publisher or whatever. You're like, I wanted that, and you just have them there just for the sake of being there. It's not that. And I think the reader is going to be at least smart enough, right, to really figure that out. And again, the character is going to come off as really shallow, and that's one of the mistakes that I see a lot of creators make, and just being cool
Yeah.
for cool sake, and the world building aspect of it, of giving a reason as to why not only the character is there, but like how they interact with that world. All that stuff takes time, it takes effort, it takes development, and that it may not be as flashy, but that's of substance, and this is the stuff that people care about. So big shout out to you for
Mhm.
even kind of bringing that stuff up, where that may
Yeah,
be something that you
yeah.
kind of struggle with. And even for me,
Yeah.
early on in the Riververse, you have these ideas that are kicking around in your head. And I remember really early on, I was just like writing stuff down just to do it. And it became one of those where, okay, I got to kind of tame myself here, because I do have to come up with a script, okay, an initial script, and that's never going to happen if I'm just trying to get to a place, and not actually giving reason as to, or the journey even, for that matter. And I think it's something that a lot of the readers have grown to, the, like, at least in our case, really appreciate. Even with ISOM's very introductory story, like the initial one, like for ISOM number one, we're trying to build these characters, and now we're giving more context to the world with like a story like Great War Separation, the one that you did the map for, which kind of
Yeah.
really does lay the foundation as to why the United States, or formerly, is the way that it is, right? That stuff takes time and obviously consideration, because you have to be careful, to not, the whole show not tell, where it doesn't feel like this just big like
Mhm.
info dump either, right? Like, sure, you want to give your
Yeah.
audience or your reader enough context to be able to have fun there. They have to be equipped with some level of knowledge, but there is a difference from allowing that story to breathe, telling that story, doing it in fun different ways as well, whether it be like, I love how you're using your website to let the audience get maybe familiar with the character, or what have you. That's kind of what people nerd out about that. So I wanted to ask you this, like, did you have a certain type of, look, there are comics about everything, right? Like, just you
Yeah.
conceptualize it. Definitely, if we include what Japan has done with their mangas, especially over the recent last couple of decades, you can find pretty much mangas on literally anything, right? Food doesn't matter, sports, all of that.
Yeah.
What made you land on with Fiendish? You kind of have this fantasy. Was it something that was more kind of a genre that you wanted to entertain because that was something that you were a fan of? Is it more or less the idea that was kicking around your head? How did you land on coming up with that concept of Fiendish?
Right. People who do watch my channel know that I didn't grow up in the States.
Hmm.
My dad's American, but I grew up in Taiwan. And because of that, I grew up reading manga. And most of my influence early on was manga. If you look at my older art style, it's like super anime, like giant eyes and everything. But I moved to the States later for art school. And only then did I come into contact with Western, American, and European comics. My influence comes from seinen manga, which is a manga genre that's more geared towards adults, specifically adult males. So a lot of fantasy, historical fantasy, kind of darker themes,
Okay.
and action. And then when I moved to the States, I resonated more with works by authors like Frank Miller. I really loved Mobius's work, who's a French comic artist,
Hmm.
as well as Jeff Darrow's art style, and Juanjo Guarnido, who drew Black Sat. So a lot of indie stuff and European stuff,
Okay.
and especially Mobius's work is very surreal, which isn't my approach, but I love that. I always have that in the back of my mind, and just that detailed art style, and especially because he did a lot of fantasy. So I kind of combined my love for all of these different art forms and these different kinds of comics, along with fantasy novels and tabletop gaming is also a big influence of mine. Because
Okay.
when I was creating Fiendish, I was playing a lot of tabletop gaming and Pathfinder and D&D, and I think everyone knows what that is.
Yeah. Of
So
course.
I was fascinated with how immersive that was. I would get into the world building, and it made me want to create my own world, but without drawing directly off of tabletop games, and which is often for like D&D and Pathfinder, it's very influenced by Tolkien's fantasy. So in Fiendish, I don't have elves or dwarves. I have humans, but the humans in Fiendish are different than real world humans. They have their own magic system. And then I have Dev and Ispoliet, Ispolin, Aluka. These are all species and races that I made up just for my world. So I try to be original in that sense.
I
And
love that.
I just combined my influence from seinen manga, like a super dark stuff like Berserk, or Vinland Saga is another series I
Shout
love.
out.
There's
I have no
also
enemies. I love it. Yes.
oh yeah, you're really excited. It's so
Yeah.
great. It's very, very good. It's yeah, one of the best historical manga out there. And of
Yeah.
course Vagabond, and then Mobius's work, and I just mashed it all together. And I did my best to tell myself, well, this is my take on fantasy. I also realized that there aren't a lot of people making high commitment long form fantasy in American comics.
Yeah.
And
You're
part of the
not
reason,
incorrect. No.
yeah, and part of the reason I went indie was because, well, obviously my influences are manga and a lot of European comics, and it's not from a lot of stuff that's American comics. And it's not
Yeah.
because I don't have respect for the history of American comics or superhero comics. It just wasn't what I naturally gravitated
Right.
towards. And I felt like there is a hole in the market of these long form stories. It doesn't even need to be fantasy. But what I realized was that publishers are very reticent to publish these high commitment long form stories because it's a risk for them, which I understand. But it also meant that, well, unless you're already famous and you'd work for Marvel or DC for like decades, or you're Robert Kirkman, you can't, it's very hard to get picked up
Yeah.
for a series that is 10 or 15 years, which is what Fiendish is. So that's part of the reason I went indie, and I wanted to create something in the American market that wasn't being fulfilled from my point of view.
I love that. And again, it's the perfect reason from your perspective, obviously, to go indie number one. Because yeah, to your point, something like that being published with it being a long term commitment, a lot of the big dogs are not going to have much interest in it. But we do live at a different time where through elements like crowdfunding and what have you, where you can make these ideas come to life, and you can have direct line of sight and contact with a very ripe sort of audience. Because to your point, like there is no one style. Maybe it as far as the market share, what it dominates. Because even you can make that case in Japan with like shonens, right? With those maybe being the
Mhm,
most popular ones, but there's still room for the others, right? And if you can target
mhm.
that audience, then you can see success. So it is awesome, and that's what I love about Fiendish, in that it is unique, right? It's not you went
Thank you.
out on a limb there to like make something that yeah it might not be the most, not like a superhero deal. It's something that you had kicking around in your head, comes from your influences, so you're like I'm gonna do it this way. Doesn't mean there's not a demand for it. It just means that demand is not being necessarily filled. So it's a gap. It's a gap in the market. So people that do nerd out about that stuff, which there's plenty both here and abroad, you target them. You target them, and I think a lot of people, as more people find out about Fiendish, they're gonna love it because it's another world to get lost in. I often think about like what got me into comics, and you brought up some of the stuff that you were fond of growing up. But a big thing for me, as an example, was being lost in those worlds. Right, it wasn't just one singular like character, though that's awesome. Right, people may have a character that they gravitate towards and have a main character even as part of a story, but really getting lost in the world, you're talking about not just that singular character. You got a support cast, you got their team, you have your antagonist, you have your actual like physical locations and things like that, like whether it be with Chuck and I talking about, hey, there's this burger joint that's going to be in our universe. It's got to be unique, and you got Boy Howdy and all these other things. That stuff is really fun to come up with, but I think we often underestimate it, even as creators, how much the audience and the reader cares about your commitment to that stuff. Like you're getting them truly
Mhm.
immersed and truly lost in this world by coming up with these concepts and also committing to that. Like, especially long term, you're telling your audience, like you just said, like this is something I'm thinking about, like for a 15-year process, right? So you're telling your audience that this is something that is a commitment, not just for them, but like for yourself, right? You're telling them like I'm in this for the long run, and that really, from an economic perspective, gives them huge incentive to not only invest early but to keep up with it, because they know that you're committed to the bit, and they pick up on this. You're already on your third part of the in the series, which is awesome. So again, big shout out, big kudos to you for sticking with it. But yeah,
You
I
gotta.
mean, yeah, I mean, you have to. You can't never quit. You gotta give it a
I'm
shot.
gonna finish
That's
it.
yeah, you got to. It's like,
No matter
well,
what.
I'm gonna get this done. So
Uh-huh.
again, so you have what's unique with you, and not to say that there aren't others. There's plenty of others, but I know definitely in the West, it's less like a mangaka or something, where it's like, okay, they're the writer and the artist. We see more. You have a writer, you have an artist, though we have writer artist. I know that's miles different from, it's for even from a collaborative perspective, is miles different from like what I do here. Rip Reverse, where I'm not, thank God I'm not one drawing this stuff. I have some of these other awesome artists that I've been working with, but you're taking on doing it all, though obviously you have others that you collaborate with as part of the project. But being a writer artist, I would love for you to kind of give your perspective, because it's much different from mine. It's a completely, I won't say completely different, but it is I don't do it. Let's just say that. Like I'm not the one drawing some of the things that I'm just descriptive as I possibly can be in my scripts. But
Mhm.
you approaching it that way while also doing your own thing, like it with your world building, like how is that? How is that approach, especially someone like that? Again, I don't engage in that because I couldn't possibly if I wanted to.
Um, so it is definitely a lot of work,
Hmm.
and, I view it as with the way that I came to be both the writer and the artist is honestly, I've never just enjoyed the act of drawing itself, which sounds weird because I'm primarily known for doing art, and I've never been a professional writer before Fiendish. I've been a professional artist for years, and I worked in animation and comics, but my reason for wanting to draw was always because of story. There was always a purpose
Mm,
behind it. And so personally for me, I had always wanted to create my own stories, and I had self-published short comics even when I was working for Marvel, just my own private, comics I would sell at conventions. And because of that, I always knew I would create my own series. It was my dream. Hey Zayd, yo, it's Phil
yeah,
Diaz. Shout out to
that
him.
I feel.
Um, yeah, another amazing creator.
Yeah, he's
And
awesome.
mhm, um, my goal was to become a writer and an artist, but I will say it is not easy. So, because drawing, you can see the physical results of it, and you can more objectively tell if someone can draw at a glance. Everyone knows drawing is hard. 10,000 hour rule, which I don't even think is true. I think it's more than that.
Yeah.
It's years and years, basically a lifetime of practice to become a good artist. And I think writing is similar, where it is very hard. And it's not hard in the same way as art, but there is a structure to it. There is a lot to learn. There's a lot to study. And just because you have a story idea doesn't mean you can't write. So with
Point.
what I also realized was it's a different part of your brain. And I will say, starting out, I didn't know what I was doing. Even having written some short comics and kind of written stories in my own notebooks over the years, what really helps is having other people look at your work. And that was something I was very lucky to have with Fiendish. I have a great team. I have proofreaders, I have editors, and all of these people help me grow as a writer and improve. I think even with Fiendish 1, even though the foundations of the story were laid down from the start, and I believe in the themes, I know exactly where the story is going in the broad strokes, there is so much that I've learned since then. I've become more concise in my storytelling. My characterization is better. I've gotten feedback from great writers like Mike Barron. I mean, I just had
Yeah. Shout out
one
Mike.
critique session from him, and
Yeah.
my gosh, I felt like my mind was blown, and I just
Yeah.
leveled up right away. And even with Phil, I do a show with him and a couple other guys where we talk about storytelling every week. So that's an ongoing process. But it does feel like two different parts of your brain, where if I'm writing, I'm writing, and that's one skill. It's almost like speaking different languages. And then when you're writing, you're in when you're drawing, you're in drawing brain, and that's an entire different skill set. So it takes a lot to be multidisciplinary. I do believe that if anyone sets their mind to it, and you have the time and the commitment and some talent, you can do it. But it is definitely not easy, and
Yeah.
it's also a reason where I couldn't do what you do, though, because you have this YouTube empire and you have the time to make so much more content, and that's something that I've sacrificed because I have to spend the
Yeah.
time drawing. And I have a YouTube channel, but I've never been a full YouTuber.
Right. Right. You
I don't
couldn't possibly do that.
You
It's
can't do
impossible. Yeah.
you can't do everything with me having to draw my own series and
Yeah.
also doing other commissions. So it's just everyone has their own disciplines, right? And you have to just recognize what disciplines you choose and you commit to it.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a fantastic point. You have to know what you don't know. I mean, that's, to me, I think, is one of the things that I always try to improve on. And thankfully, I was exposed, at least being kind of operating in entertainment professionally, for as long as I was a teenager when I first started, selling music professionally or doing it professionally. And it was, obviously, I learned a lot along the way. And there are certain aspects, just like in music production, it's the same with comics, where you have your disciplines, you have your point of focus, and you have to recognize what your strengths and your weaknesses are. So
Mhm.
definitely, it's a team effort. You know that, to actually get something out and publish it, right? You talked about the people that are also part of your projects or help with you, whether it be your editors and proofreaders like that. They're important. They're vital to the process, as well. And you have to you have to humble yourself and understand, like, okay, maybe this is something that I'm very strong with. This is why I bring people in. I don't hesitate. Like, I'm like, all right, look, I can't do this, or maybe I don't have the capacity or the time, to your point, which is our most scarce resource anyway, to be able to
Yeah.
do that. So I have to delegate that to someone that I trust, and someone or someone that's just flat out better than me, because that's their discipline. That's something that they focus on. So yeah, it is. You have to humble yourself. You got to know that, okay, this is not my this isn't my strength. And the audience will tell you, for sure, whether it is or not, when you start putting stuff out. And you just have to kind of roll with the punches. And so
Thank
yeah, I
you.
appreciate someone like yourself that even just acknowledges that fact, because it's not always pretty. It's humbling. It can be very humbling to be like,
It is.
okay, I'm not as good at this little part right here, so I kind of got to have someone else help me along the way. But there's nothing wrong with
Mhm.
that. Chuck Dixon, as far as my growth, even as a writer, has been instrumental. Just being able to speak with him on a daily basis and learn from and grow. And I learn from all the other writers as well. You mentioned Mike. as well as Saska's who are here, the other writers, even Carol. I've picked up a lot of tips and tricks from them along the way. Better ways to tell a story, again, especially with Chuck. Chuck has been almost like basically a mentor to me here, and it's been awesome to see, even from ISOM 1 to 3 or Salvage, some of the other stories that I had the blessing of being able to tell, and the improvements. It's important. It's important to know what you don't know, and there's a lot of guys that we have a lot of artists that we work with, and they recognize pretty early on, like, I have this idea. I mean, I get up with Joe all the time. Like, I have this idea, I couldn't possibly write it. I can draw it, but I can't write it. So I'm gonna get someone, get Chuck to do the
Mhm.
script. Chuck will script it out, and it comes out amazing. So
Yeah.
that teamwork makes the
Skill.
dream work, as the old saying is.
Yes,
So
yes,
yeah, you gotta
absolutely.
have that great team, and that's really cool to see, even
It's
as a
important.
writer artist. Is still that it's important to you, and you know that. So again, shout
No,
out to you.
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't do everything either. So I do pencils, inks, layouts, pencils, inks, and I do the writing. And I'm sort of the face for the series. But I have an interior colorist who's
Hmm.
way better at coloring interiors than me, because coloring interiors for comics is not the same as coloring
Covers.
covers or
Yep.
pinups, which I can do that. But coloring interiors sequentially is storytelling with color, and that's an
Absolutely.
entire different skill set. You have to understand how to color for print. You have to know how to balance your colors, and it's also very technical. Um, and there's just people that I consult for storytelling all the time, and proofreaders, and my editor helps me. So you're never alone. You don't create in a void, I would
Right.
say. Or I don't even Tolkien talk to C.S. Lewis,
Oh
and
yeah.
they bounce ideas off of each other with the Inklings. And there were a group of writers who believed in reviving fantasy, and they talked to each other all the time. So I've realized that being a creator is putting aside your ego in a certain way,
Absolutely.
where you may be the face of the series, but at the end of the day, it's not about you, it's
That's
about the
true.
story. And
Absolutely.
you're working in service of something greater, and what
Yes.
survives is the story. It's not about your glory.
I love that you mentioned that, because it can be very easy, especially in the day and age of the YouTube, and we're streaming and we're doing all this, to kind of place yourself above that. And that's one of the things that I was really trying to drive home with the team, that the idea is that all this stuff, it's not to say that it will be a blessing and a luxury if we ever get to this point to where this stuff starts to outlive us, right? But
Yeah.
ultimately that's what it should do.
Mhm.
And we're under, and I do, we no no I'm always driving the point. Team can back me up on this, and how we're always driving the point of home of, we are in the service industry at the end of the day. Like, we're not just creating for our own eyes, though everybody gets their glance, they get their proofreading, we're getting our edits done, but none of this means anything beyond, well, let's just say this. I have to prioritize, as both a businessman and a creator. I have to prioritize my audience overall, right? Like, the reader, the buyer, purchaser, customer. I have to prioritize them above all. It doesn't mean that I can't be creative. Obviously, I can, but I am in the service industry, and it is about the story first and foremost, and the characters and everything that we're creating. It goes well beyond myself. It is not about me, and there's going to be some times that, and as we found, as the Riververse has, we're 3 years in, and we get people that will find out about it, and they don't necessarily know who I am, right? And I'm perfectly fine with that. Like, I'm perfectly fine if you're like, oh well, I stumbled across this ISOM thing, and or this Riververse thing, and maybe it was Zaylin or some character that they fell in love with. It they might not know exactly who created them. And most of the time, those that have the aspirations to also create in that field are going to be the people that nerd out about that. But the reality is, and it's a harsh one, you have to understand this
Mhm.
as a creator, especially in doing like comics and stuff. The reality is that the bulk of your buyers, unless you're a teacher of some sort, are not fellow creators. They're not. Like, they're guys
Yeah.
that, like, they nerd out about this stuff, and that's their form of entertainment. They have zero desire to produce this professionally. And they look at it, they see things differently, and you have to take that into consider. The best among us have been able to do that, right? Is consider that
Mhm.
perspective, because it is different, right? And I know you can feel me on that, and also being a creator, but you're also a fan of other people's work and stuff. There's entertainment out there, whether it be other comics or music or television or whatever that you consume. That yeah, I don't have any aspirations to be a director, but I like this movie or whatever. So, my eye, that eye is just much more different from that of a like I say, director or producer. But that producer also has to take into consideration the mindset of the reader, and the mistake that a lot of people make is that it is ego, and they put themselves above the story, they put themselves above the the characters, and that is a that's a mistake beyond anything
Yes.
your wild. It's a huge. It's easy though. It's almost like social media almost works against that, right? Because it almost encourages
Yeah.
you to be a character per se, but like you have to find that balance. You absolutely have to find that balance, and you got to lead. And in doing
Yeah.
so, you got to put the story and the character above everything. And it's not necessarily an easy thing. And like I said, internet doesn't really encourage you to do that. So I saw some
Yeah.
to you say that, talking about that ultimately that's what you're servicing the story, and that's what it's about, because it can be harsh reality for other guys that have egos. I've seen this in music, people creating for themselves and then wondering like, oh, I'm a much better guitarist than that person. I'm a much better singer than those guys are. I'm like, well, maybe you are, perhaps you do, you do have that talent, but you got to understand you're not creating for yourself. You're not,
Yeah.
and hopefully you're not making it just to stroke your own ego. You have to have that bit of humility about you from every aspect of both the business and the creative side of things. That, which is what I wanted to speak on. I don't get an opportunity to really speak about a lot of that side of it with, obviously with crowdfunding. You understand, like, you're pretty much handling every aspect. When I say handle it, like you're in charge, obviously you have people that you have delegated to handle certain aspects of the process, like you talked about with your interior
Mhm.
colorist. But it's business at the end of the day. How has it been for you in trying to balance that, especially someone that's a writer artist that has to dedicate a lot of time to this, just to get it done in the first place and get to a point to where you can justify selling it to people?
Yeah, the business part is another different part of your brain that you section off. So
Yeah,
you definitely realize you have to train your brain at different skills. So there's writing and drawing, which we've talked about. And then the business side is a whole other part of a whole different way of operating, which you've done very well on. And I'm sure you've realized that the creative side and the business side are completely different.
that's
And
facts.
when and I think it's really spot on what you said about we're working in the service industry, and when
Mhm.
you're selling the book and when you're fulfilling the book and you're putting out a product and thinking about scheduling and what kind of merch to offer to the customers, that's the customer service side of your brain, and the
Right,
customer comes first that when the end delivery point of the product, after all the creative stuff is done, then you become a service industry worker.
yep,
And previous to that, you're servicing something that's also not yourself. You're servicing the story. So you switch your brain from I'm working for the story to I'm working for the customer. And I think
right,
that is the key to success. It's never about yourself, because at the end of the day, like I don't people are interested, they can latch on to the good story and the fact that they feel respected and they
right,
resonate with the story, instead of you as a normal person who's just facilitating this art from being delivered and
right.
for existing. So yeah, the service part of it is definitely an entire that was a
Yeah,
challenge when I launched Fiendish One. I tried to work my way up to it. I launched an art book campaign on Indiegogo first, just to get a feel for how crowdfunding works. And it helps that I had printed comics in the past. Like I said, I would write and publish short comics, just going to conventions and
right.
selling these little one shots. But then when I created Fiendish, I actually didn't expect it to be as successful as it has been. And
Yeah.
I'm extremely grateful for that.
So,
But it created a bit of a logistical nightmare with Fiendish One, where I realized I am not good at logistics and
mhm,
packing books and shipping books, and I'm just really slow at it. And I now outsource that to somebody else.
mhm.
I manage just talking to customers. And I think hopefully that is also more direct. And, I am the project manager and I'm the face of the series. But at the end of the day, I have somebody helping me with shipping and fulfillment. I have a factory that does my merch for me. And that's part of the team. That's part of realizing
Right.
what your strengths are and
Absolutely.
outsourcing your businesses to people you can trust.
Absolutely. No, that's key. And that takes talent as well, to be able to put people in positions to succeed. Obviously, point out, it's kind of like you're reaching out and trying to find talent that's also better than you at that aspect of that role that you want them to fill. And that can be a challenge in that of itself. And picking talent is not an easy thing to do either. Again, to your point, trusting is obviously a big aspect of it, because you got to trust them to be able to do their jobs as well. And yeah, it is a different side. That's one of my strengths, I'd say, but it's a different side of your brain. It is totally different. The creative stuff, the business stuff, like you can have all the creative ideas in the world, and the logistics, if you don't have that figured out at the end of the day, well, the customers aren't getting anything, or they're getting it in an inefficient manner, or maybe it's lacking in the quality there. But it's as important, you know what I mean? At the end of the day, so you do have to kind of either get very educated on this stuff. Is a big reason why I do some of the videos, because I found that you want to talk about a hole in the market. There's not a lot of information out there you find, and you probably found this out early on when you're doing your own thing. Like, there isn't a whole lot of information about how to operate that part, the logistics
No,
aspect of it. It doesn't really exist at all, really. And then one of the things that I found out, I was talking to people and I was realizing early on, like, wait a minute, they don't have it figured out either. Everybody's kind of just winging it here. So I'm like, okay, but it's not a whole lot of information, out there. Though it is something that is so very, very important to the process, right? Of just producing anything for that matter, but especially something that is like a physical, in like a physical medium, like comic books. Though yes, we have digital comics and stuff of that nature, but the physical aspect, you talked about merch, all that stuff is logistics. Who are you going to get to print it? Who are you going to get to manufacture? How are they going to get it to manufacture? What boxes are you going to use? How much you're going to charge to make sure that you don't get, definitely if you're doing like a pre-order system or something like that, or even crowdfunding, like you got to try to figure out, well, it's going to cost me, doing a lot of guessing, right? Educated guessing, like, oh, it's going to cost me this, so I probably should charge this rate. Like, all of that stuff is as important as the creative aspect
Yeah.
of it, and it can be a big time challenge. Even then, people look at us like, oh, y'all got, that's a big strength of y'all got y'all shit together. And I'm like, man, if you only knew the half of the absolute nightmares and fires that I had to put out behind the scenes.
I can imagine.
Yeah, it's
So funny.
crazy. We might make it look good, but man, it's anything but like just we're just kind of just coasting. Like, I think we're at a good point now, but there was a lot of trial and error. There's a lot
That's
early
good.
on with the reverse, and it was a lot of mistakes. Like, you're gonna make them. You're gonna make them, and you realize, well, okay, you kind of bump your head and you kind of make an adjustment. That's one thing that I want to give a big shout out to my team, is that they've been flexible enough to pivot when necessary, open enough to pivot, and not so hell bent on, we had this great idea, we thought it was going to work, and just because we conceptualized it, we have to keep doing it or commit to it. We were like, no, it's just not working, so we're going to figure out an alternative here. And as you build and as you grow, it's going to be a growing pain, especially if you having to scale up like what we had to do, and figuring out, like, well, now there's another element of the process I now have to consider. You may bump your head again. So it is something
Mhm.
that's awesome to see people kind of figure it out, because I also think in the independent space, the logistics aspect of it all is almost as indie, let's say, in nature as the creative aspect. And what I mean by that is there's no one way to do it. There
Right.
are, and what works for you also may not be able to be replicated by someone that's also doing in the same industry as you. That's why I'm always telling people, though, I give advice. I'll tell people my perspective, and I try to keep it open enough to things that I believe are universal. But if you think that you could just replicate kind of what I did, you can't. It's a lot that it's timing, it's personality, it's a lot needed to go right, and but it also applies to others who have seen a lot of success and done things that I can't do and have not done, for that matter. Our good friends, I'm always shouting them out. We've just were with them over at Bell County Comic Con. Our good friends at Iconic. You
Yeah,
know,
iconic.
yeah, they do some awesome work. It's very similar. It's kind of cool to see, like when we were just down there with them, like they'll have, like I have Alex or Brandon, and they're like, oh, that's our version of Brandon, or that's our version of Alex. It's cool to see how organically they we kind of arrive at a similar place, but how we execute is not the exact same, and that's because they have certain access to stuff that we just don't have, and that's a liberating thing. So this is why I'm always trying to encourage people to find what your strengths are, find out what's maybe unique to you, and understand that maybe instead of just trying to copy what someone else is doing, maybe there's something that you can tap into that nobody else really has access to, and therefore you tap into it. So it's been really, really cool to see. I nerd out about the creative stuff all the time, but also nerd out about the logistics and speaking with people like, okay, how did you pull this off? Or how do you think that you're gonna pull that off? And then hearing their journey is awesome, man. It's just as much I nerd out about that stuff just as much as I do the creative aspect of it. So it's cool to hear. But yeah, getting back to some of the like the Fiendish stuff. You mentioned 15 years. You're looking to try to, I think is it the middle of next year when you're looking to try to have Fiendish, wrapped up and ready to, I guess, put out, for that matter, sometime at the like middle next year, right?
Yeah. July is when Fiendish 3 is shipping.
Okay.
So it's
around July.
middle, like we're just like smack dab in the middle of this summer is when we'll
Okay.
be shipping Fiendish 3.
Beautiful.
Yep.
So how, as far as like mapping that type of stuff out, obviously you've learned a lot along the way between Fiendish 1 and Fiendish 2. Have you, and then what was that process like in coming up with being able to properly map out, like, be it is it deadlines that you're giving yourself, or being able to map out like, okay, I can commit to this, and I know I can probably get this out around that, like, give or take, stuff happens along the way, but give or take, that is what you're looking at. Was that like a learning curve? Was that a learning process with some of your previous campaigns? Like, how did you land to where you feel like, okay, we're in a good spot and I can shoot for around this time?
It's definitely a learning process, especially with Fiendish 1, because I didn't have a set timeline. Well, when I launched the campaign, I had a timeline, but I had several years that Fiendish 1 was being developed along with just the backbone for the entire story.
Right.
And I actually had all the inks and the grayscale version of the book done before we launched, and it was a stretch goal to get it colored. And I wasn't even planning on getting it colored until the campaign actually did really well. So then I hired my colorist. And so that was a different process. But with Fiendish 2, I realized that I felt more pressure than with Fiendish 1, because now I have to deliver. And I'll also improve on what I had before. I have to hold the reader's attention. So the longer a series builds, the more pressure there is. And it's kind of like a trial by fire. You become stronger than you ever could have thought you would be. But it really is, with every book, I feel even more pressure. But you kind of, at least for me, I definitely, with the encouragement of the fans and seeing that people enjoy it, it's always worth it, and it fuels me to be better with every book. But yeah, the scheduling stuff is also something that you build on book after book. And with the early books of Fiendish, I was actually still working a day job, so it was really hard to grasp the scheduling and the speed at which I could work. But now I have a more sound grasp of it, and I know that, well, because I did work for Marvel, if I really wanted to work fast, I could slam out 20 pages in a month. But my style for Fiendish is much more detailed than what I ever did for mainstream comics. I'm trying to make something that I can take my time with, and that isn't a monthly comic. It is something that looks like this took a year, and you can really sink into the details. So I'm giving myself more time for it. I want to do 2 pages a week, and that's kind
Okay.
of how I do the math.
Okay.
And I made sure I had a chunk of the story done before I even launch, because I think that's a strong proof of concept. I would
Absolutely.
love to do what you guys do with having the art done before the book launches, but right now
Different setup.
I
Yeah.
don't.
Yeah. Yeah. I
That's a
got.
different
Yeah.
setup. I'm not that fast yet, but if I
Yeah.
could be someday, that would be great. That would be great. Maybe next book I can aim for that. At least having the inks done, and I
Yeah.
really admire that you guys can do that. But yeah, you kind of just learn your own scheduling and your speed. And of course, as an artist, the more you work on a series, the more you draw, the faster you get.
Yeah.
And the better you get at the specific style that you're aiming for. Because what I've realized with working on Fiendish is I've honed in on a style for Fiendish that was not completely there at the beginning. And you can tell even from book 1 to the new pages I've done for book 3, the art looks slightly different. The character designs are the same, but I think the art is much better. It's more detailed, it's more dynamic. The characters look more like themselves, and it's just the solidifying of your skill set, and that's okay. That's
Yeah.
something that I think also creators should, especially artists, should accept, that you will improve. Nothing is just birthed with the first book and is completely perfect. It grows and it evolves, and you have to let yourself change and perfect your skill set, and you have to keep at it. That's another thing.
Right.
Perseverance counts for a lot, and
Mhm.
nothing is just a flash in the pan success. If you think something is a flash in the pan success, it's because you don't see all the years of hard work and the price that somebody has
Yes.
paid to get to that point before you found out about them all at once. You don't
Yes.
see what they built off of and all the sacrifices that they've made. So it's all about endurance.
Yeah, it is, man. It's can't remember who said it, but the old saying about basically someone's talking about how it's funny how the harder they work, the luckier they're using that obviously, in quotes, kind of luckier they seem to get, right? Which is
Yeah.
it kind of it speaks to that, right? It speaks to
Mhm.
it. It's a lot that goes into it, and a lot of discipline. And I for sure wanted to talk about that with you as a writer artist, because I just was talking about this in one of my creator business videos about, like, discipline and deadlines, right? Like, as an example, like how, I know it can be, and you've worked in the professional aspect, like with some other companies, how that can be a little daunting sometimes. Definitely if it's like a lot of pressure associated with it, but it's not like there aren't any deadlines where you do things independently. Like, there's like, you got to kind of
There
be disciplined.
definitely are.
Yeah, you got to be disciplined up to say, I have to get this done by this time if we're going to shoot for having this delivered or shipped, or this aspect of that comic book done by this time. I wanted to speak with you about how you kind of juggle that, right? Those internal deadlines, and just being disciplined, remaining disciplined, because though, yes, we got the fun aspect of it, especially once it gets into the reader's hands, but there's a grit and a grind to actually produce a comic. It's a lot that goes into it. So, like, what is your approach in remaining? Is it something that you ever challenge with, and doing things independently, and just remaining disciplined?
I think almost anyone who goes into crowdfunding or indie comics in general, you have to be self-motivated.
Mm,
And I think that's kind of a given, and the jumping off point where everything else grows from. And the at the end of the day, the going back to what we were talking about, you're working in service of a story. It's not you don't have a boss anymore when you're working independently, when you're running a
mhm,
business like yours or mine. We are our own bosses, and this
mhm.
extends to anyone who's running their own business. You are your own boss, and what you realize is, well, it's not about doing what makes you happy anymore, because you have to view yourself as a business entity, and you're in service of that business entity.
Right.
So
That's a good point.
I'm working in service of my story. So the boss in my head is the story that needs to be told, and I'm
Okay.
both a worker of my business and also the person running my business. And that's it's a setup that I know a lot of indie creators have, where you have an LLC and you pay yourself from the LLC.
Right,
So
right, right.
you work for, it's getting a little like technical, but it is true. That's how
Yeah,
it works. And that's one way to stay disciplined, by viewing yourself as, no, I'm not just my own boss and therefore I can do whatever I want and I can slack around and play video games all day. You're still in service of something greater than yourself. So when you think about your job that way, you can set schedules and you can do the math for how long each task will take, and you stick to it because you remember that it's not about making yourself happy, and it's not about, well, what you're comfortable with. And not to even mention the fact that if you fail, you can't pay the bills anymore. You know, you
right,
need money to
right.
be coming
Yeah,
in. But that is certainly a motivating factor. But more importantly than that, you are still working for something other than yourself.
yeah. And that's a great way to approach it, especially in your mind. It's like, yeah, sure, I might be the one writing the checks and I might be the face of it. All that may be true, but I have to be, it's dependent, it's contingent upon me working, like I am almost an employee of my, I guess that is the idea of kind of employment. The employment aspect is still a part of it, and you still
Mhm.
kind of have to. It's no kind of about it. You have to work. It's a lot, and
Mhm.
it does. It's a lot of discipline for sure, and I'm with you on that. That you have to be, anybody entering into this space doing anything independently, you have to be self-motivated. Like, you absolutely have to be, and you have to understand that that world is not going to move unless you move it, because the buck
Yes.
stops with you. So it is not only, important, it's extremely vital to be self-motivated, to remain disciplined, and to try to,
Mhm.
and that's not always easy, right? Especially once you, maybe if you go from the, like a lot of us have, going from being a, professional, maybe working for someone else, being commissioned by other people to do said thing, to now wearing the pants. And it's a different dynamic for sure. It absolutely is. Not that I don't want to diminish that, but those deadlines, that discipline, you even start to gain a greater appreciation. I've been very open about this. It's kind of odd, and may rest in peace, the great Jim Shooter, where
Mhm.
you have people that, some creators, especially of that era, looked at him, big stickler, but you gain an appreciation for, when you work independently, like what he was envisioning, right? Because he was in a leadership role and being the EIC over there, and it's his responsibility to keep the train on the tracks, right? So this is
Mhm.
why he required this of other people, and sometimes they may have not liked it, but that was the guy that he had to be. And it's no coincidence that he facilitated the greatest era of that
Mhm.
company ever.
Yeah.
And you gain a big time appreciation for that when you do things independently, because you're no longer in that position, right? Where again, you're
Mhm.
being, you may still do commissions. Hell, even me, I do ghostwriting gigs every now and then, still to this day. But it is fundamentally different from me being commissioned or contracted by that person, from me writing the contracts now for the other people. And but you still, the deadlines, discipline's still the same. There's still stuff got to get done, and even more so, now you can't really put that off on other people, right? The buck kind of stops, and
Mhm.
not to say that you can't delegate. That's not what I mean when I say that. I'm saying that the buck's gonna stop with you, right? So it's not, whether you may be contracted by someone else fulfilling a specific role, whether you're an employee, and at the end of the day, it's 5 p.m. and now it's time for you to clock out. You don't really have that luxury once you start doing things independently. It's like, well, it's not
Mhm.
someone else's problem. It's still my problem when I wake up in the
Yes.
morning. It's
Yeah,
still
that's
my
a great way to think of it. Everything is your problem now.
yes, yes,
Being
exactly.
independent isn't it's freeing in a certain way, but also all the problems are yours.
Yes, yes. It's
So,
lit, and that's still liberating to me. Like, I love the position that we're in here, but yeah, it is, the buck stops at you. Every problem is going to be your problem. You can't really afford to put things off well, not even that you can't afford it. You literally cannot do it. They can't. There's nobody above you, so you can't say, I'll
yeah.
be their problem tomorrow. I just won't even worry about it. No, you got to, you gonna go to sleep, wake up like, oh, that task that I needed to get done, well, it's still not done, and so I need to get it done going
Yep.
into the next day. So it's a lot of work, and I admire those that have been able to be independent, but also be productive. Like I said, like Fiendish, you're on your third part of this this series, which is awesome, right? Well, it's three, right? You did 2.5 as well,
Mhm.
but
Yeah.
this is three, so it's really cool to see that develop
Mhm.
over the years, and I admire those that are out there grinding it and just getting it done at the end of the day, having fun. And we can have fun all day, but you're servicing the store. You're also servicing customers at the end of the day. So the work is not going to get done unless you do it. So kudos
Yeah.
to you. I'm gonna fly through some of these super chats and still want to talk about some more Fiendish stuff, but I know there's been people that have been chiming in on like the general conversation, and I want to at least acknowledge some of the chat, though I know a lot of people will be viewing this after the fact. I want to acknowledge those that are chilling with us live. So let me just fly
Woo.
through these just real quick. Lieutenant Hughes, appreciate you becoming a member. Shout out. We have
Mhm.
Garfield's Bizarre Vigil, 29 months as hell, Ripper and Rennie. Congrats on both of your projects. Thank you so much.
Hail! Thank
Yes.
you.
Let's go, Garfield's Bizarre
Mhm.
Adventure. Marcus Henry says, read the first book. I'm liking what I'm reading so far. I definitely need to read more. Only read the first book so far. I believe he's referring to Fiendish.
Thank you. Thank you for picking it up. And I'll say I might be biased, but it only gets better,
Let's
and I'm
go.
sure you'll enjoy it.
Let's go. Snicks with a 2 said just read Saints and Sinners. Those, yeah, I believe yesterday it was the first time some of y'all started actually getting them in the mailbox. Some of y'all local to us also got it maybe early when we sent it out, but shout out to you. Says well done. All right, as an artist, yes. Please do your reviews online, even if it's in text in a tweet or a post. Go ahead and do that. We love to see those. I know As wants to see them, Critical Drinker, Mauler, all those guys want to see how you felt about their story, and that is our first anthology. So, yeah, let us know how you feel, and I'm glad you seem to enjoy it. The Wave Blur with a 10 says the indie creator said having your comic in stores next to other major IPs around the world and winning awards make you successful. I said it doesn't necessarily mean that. What is both of your takes? Well, I'll tell you my take. That's hogwash. Now, that's not to say
Mhm.
that there's no utility in that, and it's not to say that it can't be useful. Obviously, we sell to shops. You've seen Rippaverse material there, but I believe that mindset is based on an archaic, like an archaic model. There used to be a time where the only way you could really be entertained was that you had to go through these channels. As you've seen over the last decade, the technology has grown rapidly. Um, the methods upon which people are able to get books done, get music done, get all these independent entertainment projects done, it's different. And it's going to take a lot, especially people that come from that are part of the old guard, if you will. It's going to take some getting used to, because for a long time, you can imagine for the vast majority of their life, they were told that's what success looked like. It wasn't
Mhm.
how many readers you had. It was optics. It was, you got to talk to someone co-signed it, and you're seeing just how. And I'm not trying to burst people's bubble, but you're seeing with how the mainstream is dying. With some of, I'm not even speaking about the comic stuff. Just look at like news, even for that matter. How people don't
Mhm.
even look to them as like a legitimate form of news anymore, because it has changed. Fundamentally, it's different. So just because, it's not to say that there's no utility, there's no like that can't assist you or help, but you have to look at that isolated. You can't look at that all encompassing and say, well, my book is at some store, or the one of the biggest digital or online stores, mycomicshop.com sells Rippaverse material, and I've made it. Like, that's not a way to that's not success to me. I'm looking at readers. I'm looking at, were those readers satisfied, things of that nature. And because getting that material to a reader, I'm just using that in the comic book sense. You can spin it like if you want to talk about music, talk about listeners, whatever way. Being able to get that stuff to the customer, the way the methodology of that is just changed rapidly, and it still is. It's just you can't go off of old things. That's archaic, that's broken. It's just not. It's not the same. Success is going, and that also means, and I'm gonna let Rennie go in here in a little bit, but that also means that you shouldn't look at success like all encompassing either, meaning that there's like only one way that, oh, it's if you sell this much. It's not like that anymore because a lot of things have been further decentralized, right? So someone can be well off, um, living very good. And sure, they may not be selling like you think a mainstream person is selling, but they've made their business profitable. They have a significant amount of readers to where again they can actually eat and live off of their what they produce. Things are different. Things are different. So yeah, I don't think that makes you successful. There are people that have maybe, that have been published or rather distributed by some of the major big dogs, and they are being outsold by some person putting their comic on Kickstarter. So it doesn't, by that tone, by that logic, is Brandon Sanderson no longer successful because he decided to do some crowdfund comic or something like that? Like, is he less successful because of that? No, he's making millions of dollars doing that stuff. That
Yeah,
stuff.
yes.
So it's different. So I know I kind of rambled on. I want you to ask for your take as well, what your position is on that.
Um, I think that traditional avenues like having your comic in stores and especially having your comics at conventions are important, and I know you do the con circuit as
Yep.
well. So it's not so much that those things can be done away with, and that's not what you were saying
Right.
either. But I totally agree that the idea of you have to go through certain publishers and the only path to success is to have your book in stores, and you need the approval of certain, how do you put it, structures that have been set in place. That is rather fossilized at this point, and the internet has completely restructured
Yeah.
that system and the modes of distribution for any kind of information, for media, for news, like you were saying, and that goes the same for stories and for comics. So if you have readers, if you're sustaining your business and you're making your readers happy, I think that's success in the short term. That means you are doing your job as a creator, whether or not you're in stores or at conventions, whether you're pre-ordering or crowdfunding, or even if you're putting your comic out digitally, which digital comics are still very neglected by the American industry, but it's huge in Asia. It's primarily how people read comics in Asia,
Interesting.
and what's the biggest market for comics in the world? It's Japan, and it's
Yeah.
also
Yeah.
a
Not
lot of
wrong.
Korean comics are doing great digitally as well.
Yeah.
So that's why I put my comic on Global Comics,
Global
because
Comics. Yeah.
that
Shout out to
is
them.
the more, yeah, they're a great platform, and the more readers you can reach, the more success you have. And also, I think it's important to keep in mind that short-term success is not the full scope of whether or not your creation and you as a creator have reached um true success or your final goal, so to say. I can't think of an erudite way to say it right now, but at the end of the day, nobody knows who has truly done their purpose and who has
Right.
created something
Agreed.
that's worth being read and that has really made an impact until 50 years from now.
Yeah.
So that is the actual goal. The actual goal isn't, well, I need to get into stores right now. I need the approval or this or that publisher. I need to
Right.
kiss ass in this or that industry. All of that pales in comparison to, is my story going to be read 50, 100 years from now? So you should
I
set your
love that.
sights long term and think about that.
That is perfectly put. I love how you bring that up because I'm in total agreement with you on that. And look, it looks different. I think again the industry is still trying to catch up because it looks much more different, and that's it's happening. It's accelerating as we speak, more rapidly than really anything. Like the whole direct, even like market approach, like with comics, it's I don't want to say that it's become obsolete, but it is archaic for sure. Just the approach in Western comic, and we've seen that. It's not even my opinion. We've seen what happened with Diamond, obviously, and how that was a house of cards that eventually ended up collapsing. It's just it looks different, and it's going to take some adjustment. So I think that it's it's more self-preservation for when I hear, because I've heard that as well. Some people have claimed that, well, because you hadn't done this, well, you hadn't seen success. I'm like, okay, that's your opinion, and I guess it's obviously for you to have that. but it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense understanding the direction that the industry is going. That is your metric, like that, as if that is the beacon. It doesn't make sense, and objectively speaking, it's not, because people are how they digest entertainment, how they consume it is fundamentally different from what it was when we were growing up. It's not the same, and yeah, it used to be where the only place that I could get it was going to this store, and grabbing it off the shelf. That was the only way that I saw it. If it was on a commercial on the television. People got mini computers in their phone now. That is essentially a computer that they have in their pockets as they walk around, and that has fundamentally changed how people buy, even, and interact even with their audience. All of that stuff has changed from what it was even 20 years ago. So yeah, I wouldn't say that that's what it means. Maybe in their perspective, but I just don't think it really represents the reality. Irene, your world building is like Made in Abyss, said the Wave Blur with 41 months.
Thank you. I actually haven't watched Made in Abyss, but I know about it, and I know that it's rather brutal.
There you go. There you go. We have we're at Comics with a 5. Say, oh, Eric, got a great stream and great interview with a super talented Irene. Oh yeah, most definitely. Back Fiendish 3 now. Yes, you can grab it from. We have all those links. We have them pinned as we're talking about it. We have the Kickstarter. It is live right now, so go grab that. Is this your first? Is this your first campaign on that platform, or have you done pretty much all of them on Kickstarter?
This is my first Kickstarter, so it's the first time Fiendish is coming to Kickstarter.
Let's go.
It's exciting new frontiers.
Let's go. Let's go. Well, go grab that and go support her. We'd appreciate that. Jim says, with a 10, Renee is great and embodies all the virtues that a comic creator should have. I agree. She's wonderful. I mean, I always point to her just because I don't hate to use the term doing it the right way, but like I admire that. And I appreciate how she approaches things creatively, and even like with her public interactions and everything, and how she interacts with her fans, and all that I appreciate so much and admire from her. She's awesome. Like, absolutely, I agree with you.
No, same to you. Same to you. Yeah. I think just keeping things professional and responding to customers well. That's all you have to keep it as. Just deliver and be professional.
I'm right there with you. Right there with you. We have Luke with a 5 said, what is the cost to start a publisher, and what other people do you need to hire? My comic will be 24 pages, black and white, and written by me and bi-monthly. So that's what you landed on. Look, there's all sorts of costs that are going to be associated with that. Obviously, if it's going to be black and white, you got your artist. So it sounds like you said drawn and written by me. So you have that aspect of it that you're going to be, forking cash as far as the editors, your proofreaders, pre-press, people that are getting it ready for the printers. And obviously you have the print in that of itself is also something that you got to consider. And then, others, finances that are going to be associated with this. Obviously, are you fulfilling this stuff yourself? The boxes, all the material, bags, boards, whatever, all that sort of stuff is stuff that you're going to have to invest in addition to the shipping. So it's a lot that goes into it. And I think that a lot of people sleep on all of the stuff that goes into it. They have these big dreams, and then they get overwhelmed when they realize that it isn't all just about, hey, I have a cool idea and now I want to draw a cool idea. It goes well beyond that. So that's what I can think of off the top of my head. I know I'm missing a bunch of stuff. I don't know if Renee had some perspective on that, because she's also a writer artist.
Well, you're completely right that there's so much cost that goes in on the back end, and all the miscellaneous tasks that need to be taken care of, not to mention taxes. Good job. That's really great.
Yeah,
I don't get
that's
to
a
keep my
big one.
money. Anyways, not gonna get into it. I know that you would, probably agree. But there are so many things that go into creating and publishing a book. Though to just start a publisher, I will tell you, it's very easy. You just register with your state, your LLC. You pay like I don't know how much the fee is, depends on the state, but
Yeah,
you just pay that fee every year and you can start your LLC. That doesn't on its own cost very much. So that is the first step and it's a smart thing to do. So I would say go
absolutely.
ahead and do that. And but then what's beyond that is if you're a writer and artist, that's great. You don't have to pay someone else to do that part. And that is very expensive. You have to pay an artist and a writer. But then past that, so that's a good thing. You already have that cost down, and you just have to make sure when you start your publisher and your product is self-sustaining if you want to actually pay your own bills with it. What you could do is printing costs and material costs ahead of time. A tip is you can just go to Mixum, which I use other printers for Fiendish, and I know everyone uses it. There are a million printers out there, but
Hmm.
I recommend just checking the prices on Mixum because it's a large printing network where you can get a quote very easily, and they do print comics. So use that as a basis to estimate how much it would cost you to print your comics, and use that as a guide for how much you should aim for, whether you're doing crowdfunding or whether you're raising funds some other way, to make sure that you can actually produce your books, and you can put in like the page count and the type of paper that you want
Okay.
and everything. And beyond that, an even better step is actually contacting printers. Ask other
Yeah.
creators what printer that you use and get a quote from them. And then after that, find out how many what kinds of products you need for fulfillment. Geminis and bags and boards are for sale on Amazon. So go look at the prices there, estimate how much of those you'll need, and do the math. So there's a lot of stuff you can do ahead of time that will help you not go broke when you actually put out a book, and not be shocked by the sticker price of printing and producing. Because when I ran my first comic campaign after my art book, and I actually ran Fiendish 1 on Indiegogo and I had to fulfill it. And I realized that fulfillment costs a huge amount of the total campaign cost. So when you see when in crowdfunding, the number on the campaign looks great. We keep very little of that money.
Yeah,
So
that's
I
true.
would say a quarter to a third is printing the books and making the products, maybe more. And then double that for the shipping and fulfillment. And then you got taxes. So you keep maybe like a third or a quarter of that. So that's what you need to expect. And that's how much things cost.
Yeah.
So you can preempt a lot of your production costs, and try to do that math ahead of time. But actually starting your own company, that doesn't cost hardly
Good point.
anything. You should do that right away.
Yeah, that's one of the first things that you do, getting that stuff in order. And if you really, really want to start getting into like the IP weeds, I can't remember if I did a video talking about kind of the process of all of that, the between trademarking and copyright stuff, which technically even when you publish it, you have the copyright anyway. But as far as like, filing it. But yeah, I'm glad you brought that up about those numbers, because I think a lot of people think that it's sweet. I'm glad you're pretty transparent about that. Oh, here's this big number, it's tens of thousands of dollars. And then they think that, oh, I'm gonna get that. Like, wait a minute, like take a
Uh-uh.
step back. um, uh, it might look big, but that money that's already been accounted for in a lot of sense of, like, to your point, fulfillment it's not cheap, man. It is between the bags and the boards and the boxes and the manufacturing and all that, like, all that stuff adds up, and then you get shipping and taxes, like, yeah, like that. It might look like a big number, right? But it's not like that person is that is like pocketing that. Like they all, well, I see $10,000 or whatever, then that's all going to my pocket. Like, no, I don't quite work like that. Like, not even close.
No.
Not even
No, you
close.
spend all the money and
Yeah.
you ship the books, and then you scrape whatever's left for
Yeah,
yourself.
exactly. Um, we have Marcus Henry says, I think the mangaka understand putting the story and character by themselves. A lot of them don't even show their face in public and despise fame. Well, a lot of people don't even know who they are. Like, they may know of them.
Mhm.
Again, people like us that nerd out about the stuff that we have aspirations to create, we know these people. But you ask an average fan, and this is humbling to a lot of creators, right, that may be doing it for the wrong reasons. it can be very humbling when you realize that, look, man, most people aren't going to know you exist. If you start seeing like some legitimate success, you are going to come by some people that you can ask them, like, are they a fan of this character? What was the name of the person that created that character? And they're going to be like, oh, I don't know. Like, I just like this character, right? Like, but that's okay. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that, because that's been really the theme of the show. You're serving the story. You're
Yeah.
servicing the customers in a way. And look, that I think that's why it works so much for them as well, and why they put out these absolute bangers, because that's the reason why they're doing it, for the right reasons. And it is a kind of a Western kind of thing where it's like, hey, know me, I'm in the forefront, I'm beating my chest. It's all about
Yeah.
me. Look at me, how awesome I am because I created this thing. And that's a culture thing. And you're from, with definitely with you being raised in the East, you probably can speak to this a little more than I can. And I'm just speaking from, more of an outside perspective. It does seem that, and that's not to knock my fellow Americans or anything. I'm not saying, I'm just, look, man, I've been entertaining for a very long time. It does feel that, at least from the East perspective and how they view things, the actual creators of those entertainment products, or whatever you want to call them, it's a lot less ego. That's I'm not saying it's without it. I'm saying that it's a lot less, comparatively speaking, to kind of how we approach things, where the person is trying to put themselves at the forefront of whatever they create. Am I wrong on that? Like, again, with you being in Taiwan, like, is it like, or being raised there, like, or growing up there at least, is that like, again, not to try to place East versus West thing, it's culture, right? And it's a real thing.
Yeah.
Demographics are a real thing. Do you feel like that's more of a cultural kind of approach in the East?
There is definitely a cultural difference, and I would say it's also our industries are structured differently.
Mm,
So in Japan, not just is the culture very much more less about you, the culture is more conformist in many, many ways. It's more about, well, what you produce and how you serve a larger whole, what you do for the company, what you do for society, and your harmony with society. And that's just how the culture is. And Taiwan is similar. Obviously, we're not Japanese, but
y-
it is also similar. But we're mainly talking about the Japanese comic industry, manga. So that serves, though, that is part of the reason why mangaka operate the way they do. And I admire their ability to just place the work first before themselves. And it is something that I felt like I had to build up to, and realize that, well, nobody is here for me. I'm not that interesting. It's about the work itself.
yeah.
And mangaka, they start out with that understanding, and I admire that. But at the same time, we also have to keep in mind that their industry is structured in a way where independent creators with original ideas can go to a publisher. They can go to Kodansha or Hakusensha, and these publishers will handle distribution and putting their work out there. So the creators themselves don't have to be sort of the face for their work and put themselves on the internet
Good
and
point.
market their
Yeah.
own work. In America, our mainstream publishers have their own IPs. And with the exception of Image, most independent creators do have to put your face out there, and you do have to make direct connections with the audience, and you have to sell your work and come on streams and do the pitch or go to conventions and sell in front of people. So there is a cultural difference, and I admire the confidence of American culture. So I admire different aspects of both
That's I like that.
approaches.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think a good approach is find a happy middle somewhere in between, because we're working in our industry, so we do have to put ourselves out there. But it helps to step back a bit and realize that it's about selling the work and it's not about us, even though our industry necessitates that we do have to become more forward and more public than a mangaka would.
I love that. It's kind of is that balance. And I do think everybody's trying to find that kind of happy medium. It's one of those things that I've had to, do. Like, I went from doing my show every day and streaming and doing all that to, well, wait a minute, I don't even have time to do any of that anymore. So I had to make a big adjustment. But it's like, it's about how, I guess, how I would word it, is more so about that connection, at least in the West. And I think a lot of that stems from how people have been burned with the kind of entertainment, like, put a spotlight on a lot of these creators over the last 10 years or so. We know definitely in the political sphere how people found out like how they were despised by the creators of some of their favorite their favorite material, and
Yeah,
people are
that doesn't
taking
help.
yeah, it doesn't help at all, right? So people are a lot more mindful of who they are giving their time and resources to, and I totally empathize and understand that. It's just where we're at. Like I said, it can there's liberating aspects of it as well, and that we are a little more decentralized, or rather more a little more independent, and because of just the way that the culture is, you are a little more in comparison to what they how they are in Japan, a little more front facing. I think more of what people value now is that connection
Mhm.
with that creator, and I look at that as more of an advantage than anything. People are looking for that connection, and you can make that. I think what everybody's trying to figure out how to do is connecting with that audience. What does that look like, right? Like if you would have told me 10 years ago there'd be these freaking like the VTuber thing, right? That would even be a thing that people
Mhm.
value. I'd be like, you're crazy. There's no way people are gonna basically be like, yeah, I get it. People have been anonymous all the time, but nobody's gonna sit there and watch a full stream of someone, as an avatar. Like that's not gonna happen. Like, well, here we are, right? So
Well,
yeah, exactly. But what that shows is that there's no one way to do that, right? Like no one
yeah.
way to connect. It's the connection that's more meaningful, and that looks differently for, and it's evolving. It looks differently for everybody. Really, that's a part of it, and that's cool. That's a liberating thing. There may be some ways that people are connecting with their audiences that we can't envision right now, and someone stumbles across it, and it's really really cool, and it works out for them. So we'll see. But I think that's what people, at least on our side of the world, that's what they value. Professor X with 26 months says, couldn't jump in during y'all's last interview, but I'm diving in head first this time. Let's go. Everything, cards,
Yay!
map, previous book. Oh man, I
Yay!
love to hear this.
Thank
Let's
you
go.
so much.
This will be my
Yeah.
second comic book world to explore, and I'm pumped. Professor X,
Thank
you're a
you.
big supporter of the Rippaverse. I couldn't recommend this anymore. Follow Rini, follow her material, go grab everything and start to get lost in her world. If that's going to be another one for you to keep up with, you're in good hands. So go grab that stuff there.
Thank you
And
so much.
yeah, big shout. Professor had the luxury of meeting him multiple times at these cons. Man, he's awesome dude. Awesome dude. Okay, we have Larry with a two says, wonderful interview. Always learning something. Oh, that's what we try to do here. I like to think. Try to interview people that again they have a perspective often that I don't. We have CJ says, I want more Rini covers in the Riververse, please. Yeah, she's always got a spot with us. Always.
Aw,
Whenever
thank you.
whenever she
I'd
has
be
time.
happy to. I'd
Yeah.
be happy to.
She is amazing. Scorpio with a 5 say, I'd like to nominate Rainey
Yeah.
to write and draw a story for Saints and Sinners Part 2, please. He's talking about our short
Hold on.
anthology series.
Ooh.
Which yeah, like look, she's got her own stuff she's rocking with, but like I said, we have a spot for her. Anytime she wants to do a cover or something like that, I always have a spot for her. She's awesome. I love her work. You guys love her work as well. So whenever she has time to squeeze in something, I'd be down to give her, cover or even a story if that's what she wanted to do. She's all right with me.
Appreciate
Okay.
it.
No, anytime. But I want to go in on like obviously your main character here, Kazmir. I'm
Sure.
always
Ooh.
kind of nerd out about, okay, you have this character that you've been able to make the face of your series.
Mhm.
I want the whole process of. I know we talked a little bit about how you create characters, but specifically with
Mhm.
with with Kazmir. Kazmir, I want to know what that thought process was, how you landed on him. Um, was he influenced possibly by anybody that you were thinking? Because he's essentially again like one of the main character in your Fiendish series, the main protagonist. So yeah, give
Mhm.
us the whole story with him.
Mm. Yeah, so as I mentioned at the beginning, Kazmir is the focus of the story of Fiendish. The story begins with his family getting killed by these mysterious demons, and it's his search for the truth behind what these creatures, what these monsters really are that drives the story forward. And I think a protagonist has to be somebody that has that force that drives the story forward. I've heard in my process of learning to write, a lot of writers mentioning how your protagonist needed to be sympathetic or needed to be appealing or charismatic. And I actually don't believe that to be the
Okay.
case. I think your protagonist just has to be somebody that is compelling. And that is more important than anything else. They don't have to
Right.
be nice, they don't have to be likable. There are plenty of gruff, nasty protagonists, but what they do embody and what they do to make them work as protagonists are they are actionable and they have forward momentum and they're pivotal to the story being moved. And Kazmir is that. I in a way wanted to challenge myself by creating a character who isn't very nice.
Okay.
He's not a very charismatic person, and that's also why Iskal is there. And Iskal is the little archer boy over on the right side, who is Kazmir's cousin and also his hunting apprentice. Iskal is a cursed boy who was abandoned by society for having a curse that you'll find out more about in Fiendish 2 is when it's revealed. But he's shunned by everybody, but because he's Kazmir's cousin, he's left with Kaz, and Kaz takes care of him, but in a very not outwardly nurturing way, but he guides the boy kind of in this like very rough, I'm just here to do what needs to be done, like a very rough, manly, lives in the wilderness kind of approach to raising a kid. But he took him in and he did care for Iskal when nobody else would, and that shows his character, and that shows that even though Kaz has many hangups from his family being killed and this trauma that he's witnessed, which I thought was realistic. I don't think somebody could go through what he has and be a normal, well-adjusted person, and he's not. But at the end of the day, he does want to help people, even though it's repressed in many ways, even though he's been taught I have to do what it takes to survive. He lives in the woods, he has to kill bandits, he has to protect his cousin, he has to protect himself, and he was trained by this wild hunter guy who taught him to kill at a young age to defend himself. But at the end of the day, when he's faced with somebody who is innocent who needs help, he wants to have the strength to protect them, which is why he went to this hunter to begin with. He vowed to himself when he escaped his hometown that he would never be as weak as he was that day again. He was going to become as
Okay.
strong as he could. And his journey is not only about seeking the truth and finding justice for his family, but about how to become strong in the right way. Is strength just fighting wild beasts and killing bandits and defeating demons, or is it something else? Is it being a leader that people look up to? Is it having the right kind of instincts to discern truth from deception? And those are themes that all slowly reveal themselves as the story goes forward, especially in Fiendish 3. All the opposing party starts to be revealed. We see I have a mystery villain that I just revealed when I launched a campaign. So you start to find out we're not just up against demons. This story isn't just about hunting monsters, because those are unintelligent beings that they're out there to kill humans, but they're not an intelligent opposing force with their own philosophy. There's somebody else behind them that does want to harm people, that did bring the humans forth, and we start finding out who that is. And that means Kazmir, as a leader of his team, as the prime person who can use his memories to figure out what these demons are, what really happened in Dorvo, his hometown. He has to start discerning what is the truth. How do I go up against these intelligent foes? So that's why Kazmir is the leader of this story. He's not charismatic, he's not nice, but I think he is very, very compelling, and he changes as the story carries forward. He learns to be a better man, a more sympathetic person. He learns from Iskal, who is a very empathetic, kind little boy. he's very trusting, and that opposes Kazmir's viewpoint, but that softens Kazmir and teaches him to view things from a different viewpoint. And that back and forth drives the story forward and is the moral undertone for everything moving forward.
I love that. And I love what you bring up about, and I empathize with it, obviously, because of with our first character being Isom, and that's one of the kind of things that were unique to him is him being rough around the edges, right? Especially once we first introduced him, the reluctancy to get involved. He's a former hero, and sure he softens up a little bit as the story goes on. But yeah, he wasn't there to be the most liked character, let's say in the story, though people became fond of him. So I totally agree with you in that making that character compelling, making him a primary driver of your story is vital. And you can tell stories off of any kind of character, and it can land. Not to say some aren't more or less, as far as their types aren't more or less difficult to write. There's a way to do it, and I appreciate that for sure. And I love that you use some of these supporting characters to maybe fill that void there, of what maybe some people would, the more kind of bright-eyed approach of what they think a protagonist or hero is supposed to be. But it's look, I didn't, and I want to be kind of go into, like, obviously with his personality and stuff. Was that something? Hey, I'm just kicking around in my head, or is that like, did you have influence maybe from, again, people that were around you, people you grew up with, stuff like that? Was it just, hey, I just got an idea, this is who the person was that I wanted to create, this is who I wanted them? But was there any sort of influence in creating your main character?
Right. So I've mentioned Berserk before, and
Hmm.
I really, really love Berserk. Though Kazmir is very different than the main character
Obviously.
of Berserk, Guts. He's not the 6'4" giant, 30 ton sword wielding hunk. He fights differently. He has a different personality. All of the story is different, but that approach of you can have a protagonist who isn't likable on the surface, but there's so much more depth to him, and
Absolutely.
he has emotional depths, and he has deep-seated sympathies that aren't revealed right away because he feels like he has to hold it in order to get things done. That is a storytelling aspect, an aspect of Guts's character that I was very inspired by and just fascinated by, and I took that to heart, and that was part of what went into building Kazimir. And also, this might sound funny, but Kazmir is also partially based on this archer that I played in tabletop gaming and Pathfinder. So I built a character, and I like playing rangers and archers. And I had this character who's very uncharismatic, but he ended up being the leader of the team for various reasons. And that experience of stepping into a character's shoes, somebody who was had a lot of baggage from his past and was not necessarily primed for a leadership role, but was thrust into that role and moved forward anyways because he felt like that's what needed to be done. And he evolved as the story progressed with that weight on his shoulders. That's something I had experienced because I was in that character's role. I was looking through his eyes, and that combined with my love for Berserk, and
Okay.
there's a little bit of Full Metal Alchemist in there as well. If you see the magic system of Fiendish, it's a hard magic system that is scientific, and I have the four states of matter and different domains. Anyways, it's a little similar to Full Metal Alchemist, and that kind of character who Ed Elric isn't gruff or unlikable, but he's a little rough in his own way. He's like brash, more like, and that there's a twinge of that in Kazmir as well. So it's many different influences, as well as a character that I really enjoyed playing, and that I just felt like hasn't been done before. I definitely didn't want to create a standard fantasy protagonist. And another aspect of what of my thought process when creating my protagonist was I didn't want to tell a story about royalty or about special people. All my main characters are normal people. So there might be more royalty or people from the upper class later on in the story, but Kazmir is just a normal guy that terrible things happen to, and he's rising to the occasion because that's what needs to be done. And he realizes there are demons out there and somebody behind these demons that only he, through his memories, can hunt down. So that's what my story revolved around, and that's what I built everything starting from.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
Mhm.
Man, just that level of depth that just in hearing you talk about it is awesome. That you can see the thought that you put in the character and also those around him as well. So about like obviously we talked about earlier like some of the maps and we talked about like the language and everything and it being this immersive universe. Has this ever been something that you like is your process? I know we talked about, look, you'll take this 15 years, Lord willing. Um, is there do you want to stick to okay, there's this fiendish and maybe you got like the 2.5s and the such, but have you considered like entertaining like other titles, I guess, as part of the Fiendish universe, or is this something like, no, I got Fiendish, I'm putting everything in this title and that alone?
I have thought of some spin-offs, but I very much try to constrain myself so I focus on the story of Fiendish and the story of Kazmir and his companions.
Fair enough.
But part of my purpose for having the point 0.5 stories, and you brought up 2.5. And for anyone
Mhm.
in chat who doesn't know what that is, 2.5 is the first one-shot side story in the Fiendish series. And I have many 0.5 chapters structured that way, where they're
Okay.
one-shot stories, but they are stories that either are character flashbacks, like 2.5. 2.5 was a flashback to Casimir's past when he was being trained by this hunter, but it's a self-contained story. And it's a
Makes
good
sense.
jumping on point for readers, especially if the series is further on and you have like 5 or 6 books and you need to read so many books to catch up, but maybe you can pick up a 0.5 story and get a feel for the world and for my storytelling style. And if you like that, which you do, then you will be compelled to read the main series. So I have many more 0.5 stories
Okay.
sprinkled into the series, and the purpose of that is to expand on character backstories, but even background characters, or maybe one day characters that don't have anything to do with the main plot, but are in the same world. And that way I can explore those ideas. And
I love
for,
that.
by the way, for those stories, I do hire other artists to draw that. 2.5 was drawn by Michael Rushbrook, my current main secondary artist, and I plan to definitely give him more work because he did an amazing job on that story. And that way I can be free to draw the main books, and the main books I'm committed to drawing them myself unless I lose my hands or something, God forbid.
Yeah,
And then the side stories I can work with other artists and kind of bring a new perspective to the world of Fiendish. So that's my plan
that's
for
your
this
way.
world so far. Yeah.
See, that is awesome. See, so I love that answer, and I love the genius of using the point fives as that, right? Because that's really what I'm asking, right? That's why I was talking about, like, hey, you have these other titles to really expand upon your universe beyond just the main story, and that's essentially you're just using the point fives for that to be able to tell these into your like you just said like some maybe it's not they're not even going to be connected to the main so it's part of the same universe but maybe they're not even connected to what's going on at the time in the main story. That is a very creative way to keep things kind of cohesive, to keep things so whether you don't have the multiple thought like our approach, while being able to expand upon the universe. So that is a creative way of doing that. I love that. That's
That's
awesome.
one approach. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's I mean it's also awesome when creators can do what you've done with having multiple titles set in the same universe, and I admire people that can manage that. I just don't I personally don't think I can manage that. So part of it is knowing my limitations
Yeah,
and
that's
with
part of it.
just the main story of Fiendish is very is a lot to handle and is very expansive. But I admire people that can have multiple series and multiple titles and they build this network of writers and artists that are all in sync and building this world together. I think that's really awesome. But like the goal in the end is just giving the readers consistent value and consistent
Right,
entertainment and they are here to explore the world and that's why they support us. So
right.
whatever model creators take, I think it's great as long as you're serving the readers and giving them a nice expansive view of this world.
Yeah, and that's what it's about. Everybody knows that I'm a big universe guy. That was part of why I went the route that I went. With creating the Rippaverse, right? From the get go, we're telling you, hey, we got this universe, and it's going to be ever expanding, and there's going to be different writers and all that. We made that, we established that day one. So anybody that's telling stories beyond, because that's me. My it's not that I have something against people that are in comics that want to do just like kind of a one off thing. Um, and maybe it's a graphic novel or something like that. I'm not knocking anybody that wants to do that. It's just for me and my personal preferences. What I nerd out about is the universe. I nerd out about everything associated with not just that one story that I'm reading. It's the consequences from said stories, what's going on with the protagonist, what's going on with the antagonist, what's going on with their those the families, what's going on with the again with maybe it's if it's in a more modern sense, the shops and the stores, and maybe there's a like what we have in like an Alpha Core or Projexis, where you have this biotech company. I nerd out about like, okay, well, what does that mean for the greater world? Because that happened, and folks that do like the universe thing, they that attention to detail is something that they care about, and that's what I nerd about. That's
Mhm.
what a lot of fans of the Riververse nerd out, which is why I'm recommending this. If you are a fan of the Riververse and you like fantasy stuff, especially, like this is a great one to go get lost in.
Thank
If you
you.
want something that's more so in that setting. I know we've tried, like we have Blood Ruth and some of the characters that kind of float around that, but if you're looking like sort of alternative, like a fantasy experience, Fiendish is where you should go if you are into like the universe and really want the creators to really be expanded upon the world and the world building aspect of it. So couldn't recommend this anymore. Let me get to some. I know someone brought up in the super chat. Uh, Rennie, hold on, where is it at? Marcus, here we go. With a 5 says she's making me want to catch up and Fiendish anymore. Let's go.
Yeah!
Let's go.
Awesome.
Go get caught up.
Fantastic.
Go get caught up. Go get caught up. Um, yes, we have again everything in the description. So if you're watching this after the fact, go check that out. But you can also go to fiendishcomic.com to get more information about the world and seeing some of the links of where you can buy all the products and everything. Fiendishcomic.com. But
Mhm,
obviously, as we have mentioned multiple times here, the Kickstarter just kicked off not too long ago. Would
mhm.
appreciate it if you go over there and go back that would
Yeah.
be absolutely amazing over there. This is the live Kickstarter. Of course, you get chapter 3 over and in demand over on the Indiegogo side. All right.
Mhm.
Thank you so
Oh,
much
I
for.
did
Go ahead.
oh, sorry, I forgot to mention one thing. The Indiegogo does have original art and the Kickstarter doesn't, but the Kickstarter has a bigger bundle for
Okay.
catching up on previous books.
Okay.
And on Indiegogo you can still get the previous books, but I don't have like the giant Gigalith bundle. It's called the
Right.
Gigalith on Kickstarter. But if you're looking for original art, head over to the Indiegogo. It's still in demand.
There you
Just want
go.
to
So
make
you
sure I
can get
mentioned that.
some of the original art there.
Yeah.
And so I like that. So basically you can get something out of really backing both. So why not?
Mhm.
Go
Yep.
grab it from Indiegogo as well as Kickstarter. Go check that out. All right,
Thank
all
you.
right. Let me grab this one right here. Also for Marcus. Says also Ripple. We were wondering as fans since Riververse has a point, have a Sister Ripper zines. I got you. Okay. Have a point where they are phasing out. Will the graphic novels that spawn from them have that story in the graphic novel? Um, when you say phasing out, like I guess you mean like a point where the story in the Ripazine is ending. I'm assuming that's what you mean. Y- Not all the time. Like with Salvage, the myself and Bart Sears story, that literally begins right where uh Ripazine, so you can pretty much read it directly in order. So it just depends. That's actually part of the reason why we do the surveys after the Ripazines go out. The short stories meant to kind of collect data. Look at it like that. We're trying to pick up not just that you liked it, but we're picking up what you were interested in, because that's going to let us know how if the story is to continue, how that approach is going to be. So I guess my answer to that is going to be, it's not going to be the same. Some will maybe have a graphic novel that will have that particular story um from that, because it's just an extension like Salvage. But like with Saoirse, that's an ongoing series. That's a little different of approach. We got Dirty Deeds and how we're going to be approaching that. Those are different. So it just depends on the title. It depends on the feedback that we get from the audience, because believe it or not, it's not all the same. Yes, people love Salvage, people love Saoirse. They love both of those stories, but not for the same reasons. And they're both detective, I guess, private detective, they're PI stories. They're not the same. So what people liked from them and people picked up is different. That really does influence how we tell the story going forward. So it's not going to be just one singular way. That was never really the approach. It just was, are we going to continue to expand upon this character and how that's going to look? And also, Salvage is a title, right? In a graphic novel, Saoirse is an ongoing series. So that in itself shows you that those are different. They both came from Ripazines, like 15, 16 pages, but they were both different. Okay, I want to give you an opportunity before we end up bouncing, Rainey, to sell us on Fiendish yet again, guys. Remember, you can go to Fiendish comic, .com.
Yeah, Fiendish.com. Yeah, Fiendish.com is something else. That's not my website.
Yeah,
It's changed ownership. I don't know what it is. It was
yeah,
like this wine thing. Anyways, yeah, fiendishcomic.com, where that's where you
fiendishcomic.com.
can, yeah, that's where you can find all the links, and you can find, look at that, all the world building info. I have my species, a preview, a world map, and I have my whole constructed language, the Narsa, on there as well, if you want to really nerd out and delve into the world of Fiendish. But yeah, so Fiendish is my fantasy mystery comic. Here you can see the world map. I
Love it.
decided that I wanted to create what I wasn't seeing in especially American comics, which was high commitment, long form fantasy comics. And that's part of the reason I decided to go indie, was because I realized that was the only way I could tell the story my way and create as expansive of a world as I wanted and take on all the risk myself. So it is very, very amazing that the series has done as well as it has, because it's all because of the support of the backers through
So
crowdfunding and of people who have supported the website, because I'm completely independent. I do the writing and the art with a small team, and we're all surviving because of you. But yes, the story of Fiendish starts with my main character, Kazmir, who was a young boy whose hometown was decimated by these mysterious demons that killed his family and took everything he knew away from him. And there he is as an adult. He is told by his brother, who died saving him, to run far away and forget about everything that happened. So he does that, but at the beginning of Fiendish 1, he realizes that he can no longer run away from his past and from the massacre of his family, because these same monsters that destroyed his hometown and devoured his family and turned them into these weird mummified corpses. There are these strange magical creatures that nobody actually understands and nobody has seen since. They have returned to the world. So he takes it upon himself to find the truth behind who brought about these demons, what they truly are. And he might not be ready for the task of leadership and for this gargantuan journey because he's just a normal guy who's kind of grumpy and has a lot of baggage. But by God, he is the only person who can do this. So he's going to step up and get to the bottom of what these monsters are. And it's going to eventually lead to a larger world-changing mystery that is slowly being revealed. And Fiendish 3, I've been telling readers that 1, 2, and 2.5 was like laying the runway for the story. Now you know who the characters are, you understand the world building, you know what shamans are, I've introduced the magic system. So in Fiendish 3, we're taking off because now we see the reveal of these mystery villains right in the first 15 pages. That's a free preview on Global Comics. You can click that link right there and read 15 pages for free. You find a reveal of what the demons are in just those pages, and there's 3 or 4 more huge reveals as this story progresses. And once you get through Fiendish 3, I'm sure you're going to be amazed. You're going to want to read more because I'm in this for the long run. I want to wow you with every book and sell you every step of the way. So I'm very excited to bring you along for this long form journey and tell you more about the world of Fiendish.
Let's go. Fiendishcomic.com. It's on Kickstarter, Chapter 3. You can go grab it on Indiegogo and as well. It's in demand, so go make sure that you go check that out. As you see right here, we got the Kickstarter, and of course we have the Indiegogo as well, which is on in demand. Again, as you said, if you want some like original art stuff, this is available as part of the Indiegogo campaign. The Kickstarter has bundles and stuff if you want to get caught up, and this is the first time being on Kickstarter, so be sure to go show us some love and go check that out. Again, that's fiendishcomic.com will take you, and you can learn more about the world and nerd out about that stuff. Rennie, she's amazing. She's awesome. I appreciate her, of course, joining me today. We'll have her on more often, definitely, now that For Canon's Sake is returning next Monday. We'll be returning for the first time, so that'll be fun. We'll be doing some cool segments. We'll make sure to bring Rennie in to talk about stuff comic related. Obviously her own stuff, we want to make sure we're plugging that. We want to make sure you get out there and support it. But again, she is a wealth of knowledge just because she's very creative and knows how to communicate that very well. This is the favorite material of her that I love to even watch myself, and I get nuggets from, believe it or not. It's awesome. So she's a great follow. So go follow her on social media as well. And I appreciate you joining me, and congrats on the success that you've been seeing with Fiendish. Keep it up, keep at it, and much love to you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate your time. I know you're managing an empire over there, so your time is precious, and I would say the same to what you're doing with the Rippaverse. I admire what you're doing, so I'm always learning from how is Eric doing his advertising, how are they marketing. I'm not even kidding. I watch your videos talking about that. I look at how you do your social media posts, and I'm like, that man knows what he's doing. So I admire what you're doing. I appreciate it a lot, and I thank you very much for the invite. I'd love to come on and talk about comics and the creative process anytime. It's always a pleasure.
Let's go. I'll be sure I'll take you up on that. We'll be in contact and we'll talk about everything creatively. All right, guys, we're gonna get up out of here. Guys and gals that are watching us, we appreciate you. If you're watching this after the fact, please go back her on Kickstarter, go back it on Indiegogo, as well as visiting fiendishcomic.com. Thank you all for your continued support, obviously, for everything that we're doing here at the Rippaverse, but there's a lot of people that are doing awesome things in the independent space, and we've talked about Rennie multiple times, and we're going to talk about her more in the future. I'm sure we will. All right, guys, we're going to get up out of here. I will be seeing you, what is tomorrow, Friday. I'm sure I'm going to be streaming at some point because we are closing down Rippazine issue number 5, as well as, Neurotics book. Might pop in. I don't know what's going to happen with that, but it's going to be a heavy push there. So be sure on the Ripasend side, go support that. All right, guys, we're going to get up out of here. I will see you guys next time, and peace out.